Okay, so welcome to another Jenkins X Office Hours. I think some of the things we had high level to talk to, but as always, people chime in with some areas you wanted to focus on, or any questions or any topics you wanted to share. I think we were going to talk a little bit about some of the walkthroughs we've done, just put out for Jenkins X3. Maybe talk about some of the other things we want to be seeing. There's already been some already raised with issues. Tom, I think actually I was going to refer to one of the issues you raised a little while back. I think James was going to maybe talk about some uses things, maybe. Yeah. Which is really quite interesting. Wow, love it actually. Something that's been discussed around about how to improve pipelines using Tekton pipelines. And there was also, we're going to have a brief, I think maybe one of the subjects was around LTS as well. So we wanted to try and maybe just bring up that we're going to try and look at doing the first LTS release towards the end of this month. So we've got 5 days to do that. So talk a little bit about that. James, rather than me just talking, did you want to kick off and talk about some of the stuff you've been looking at?
Yeah, I might have to turn off my video because I've got lots of kids homeschooling. I just caught one of them on 3 devices on video at the same time. So I might just turn off my video just because I might not have much bandwidth. But one of the challenges we've had forever, really, since the Jenkins days is how can we share pipelines across trees, but keep things simple and flexible? So you might use the same pipeline for all of your Spring Boot microservices or Node.js applications, or whatever, but then on one application, you want to change something. Do you copy and paste the entire pipeline, and then you've got lots of pipelines everywhere that you're now managing, thousands of pipelines? One of the strategies we went with V3 was to use kept, KPT, so that we can effectively use a copy YAML files to different repositories, and then you can use git merge and whatnot. So you can do anything really simply, and keep track of things that way, and then upgrade when you wish, which is fine. The downside with kept is it forces you to remember to have to do kept upgrade or to JX GitOps upgrade to upgrade your repositories to keep everything in sync. So it's more likely everything is going to keep stale. So one of the things we've been kind of pondering, how can we do a better job of keeping everything shared, but letting you override anything whenever you need it, but keeping things simple? One of the things we did with V2 was we created a new DSL, domain-specific language. There was an abstraction above Tekton and was a little bit different to Tekton. And then that generated your Tekton, and that did this kind of composition stuff. The downside with that is it was complicated. You had to use it. It wasn't Tekton, so it was a different DSL, which added to the complexity. And it never quite kept pace with Tekton very well, so it was always a little bit out of date. There was some things you could do in Tekton you couldn't in the DSL, and vice versa. So this has been a constant issue. I mean, the issue was there in these days where when you use the Jenkins shared pipeline libraries, that's complex in another dimension entirely, because you're never sure when you use a shared pipeline library that you've no idea what the pipeline library looks like. It can change. Your use of the pipeline library could break. Plus, you've no idea what the Jenkins server looks like. So that was another area where things would break. Anyways, to cut a long story short, this has been a constant issue, I guess, on all of the CI/CD frameworks, approaches, tool sets. So we've had a few goes at trying to solve this in different ways. And I did a little experiment last week in Lighthouse. I'll post a link in the chat to the docs, just so you can kind of have a little look at the example. Where's chat gone? There it is. I can never find chat in all these different clients. There we go, I've popped in the chat. The basic idea is GitHub Actions has a uses clause, where when you're writing steps in GitHub Actions, you can reference a step in the Git repository. Basically done is we use the same uses syntax, so that if you specify, in fact, let me get the link. If you specify an image with a uses, let me share my screen actually, that might be easier. sure I can share my screen.
Maybe I need
Oh,
to.
there's a green share button. I couldn't see it. Okay, can you see my desktop now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got it.
Can you see? There should just be a web browser there with the documentation, right? Check out share my right screen. Yeah, cool. So we basically use this. There's if you have ever looked at Co or Mink, they use this strategy of rather than making a whole new DSL, they just use a custom image, or they use a prefix on images. The same trick. This is a normal piece of tunnel, and if a step, you have an image on the step. And if the image is uses is this special prefix that says we're going to reuse a step here. So the basic idea is uses can just refer to a local file. It can refer to a URL that can be anywhere on the internet. Or the more common case is it can use a Git repository. So this is the organization, the repository name, and then there could be an arbitrary path. And then there can be a Git version. That could be a branch, a tag, a shard, or whatever. So what this basically means is you can inherit a step, a single step, or a group of steps. Now, if you don't have a step name, it reuses all of the steps in that YAML in Tekton. Here's where we list each individual step. So we're going to use that step and that step with this kind of uses string. Noisy because we're repeating this image string, or because we're basically pointing at a Tekton task in Git and then pulling out all of the steps that we want to use from there in here. So then we have a concise syntax where you can specify the uses once in the step template. Step template is a standard piece of Tekton that lets you define common things for all of your steps. So you define a common image, common resources, common environment variables, and so forth. So this is a Tekton feature that lets us define this reuse image once. So now we just have basically a list of steps. So we have a list of steps, and because these steps don't specify an image or in fact anything else, all of those steps are inherited from this Git repository in this path. Oh, that path, there we go, that path, and that version. To cut a long story short, this is a really simple syntax using one magic string, uses, to refer to a group of steps, an individual step from a Git repository. Now, the really nice thing about this is we're declaratively saying where these steps come from. So we can inherit these steps, and then you can override them, or you could add your own custom steps. So here's an example where we've decided to add our own step. Because it's got an image, this isn't inheriting the same uses image. So the image and a brand new step, and we can add steps anywhere in here. So we can, by using vanilla Tekton YAML, we can mix and match our own steps with steps from a pipeline library. So that'd be cool. So the really cool thing about this is you can use any Tekton editor, VS Code, any like visual editor, or any kind of VI that has schema support, whatever, any edit YAML and has type completion and schema validation, all those kind of things. We can edit this YAML. It's vanilla Tekton YAML, but we can include inherit steps. We can also inherit those steps in the middle, at the top, at the bottom. We can take any individual steps. We can also override the steps themselves. So here we're using the step from the pipeline, we override. So we could inherit a step, inherit the image and the environment variable, whatever, and we can just add a different command line, a different step, a different environment variable, or whatever. So anything you do locally overrides what you inherit. So we can override everything, or we can override nothing. It's totally up to you, kind of thing. We can also reuse a step many times. So one other piece of magic is if you have a colon after it, it lets you essentially inherit full copies of the image. So for this was sometimes you want to build an image 3 times with different Docker files. So this is a way of sharing a Docker build step, which is sometimes quite complicated, and just override a single environment variable or whatever command line thing. So to go a long story short, this is a really simple way of pipelines so that you can declaratively inherit from a library, but if ever you want to edit, you just pop up your editor, edit anything here, and it all just clicks. I'll probably do like a real blog and a real demo with a live demo of how this all works, because a bunch of pipeline that helps you understand all of this. If I look at JX pipelines command line reference, we have a couple of commands. We had similar things back in tip command, which basically shows you command. It asks you
breaking up a little bit there,
pipeline.
James.
Oh, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah.
I'll just do audio. So we have a bunch of commands in JX pipeline. Effect shows you the effective Tekton YAML before you commit. So you can see what's the effect of making the local changes and what the Tekton YAML will actually create. And there's also an override that lets you override basically in lines from the shared library. So you can see the full details of what the shared library would do for that step. And then you can just edit what you need and delete what you don't need, kind of thing. So this isn't baked in yet into the current catalog. I'm just doing some more testing right now. I'm going to try roll out a new version stream with a new catalog and see if this all works. And if it does, we'll roll it out. In many ways, it doesn't change things. You can still use this new approach. You can combine them together. You can do a bit of both. It's completely up to you. The really nice thing is it means this uses syntax means we can immediately use any step or any steps from any Tekton catalog library. And anybody could make a Tekton catalog library of any shape or size, and we can reference all of those steps really. Slight ramble, I'll do a proper blog and demo next time, but it's looking really lovely. Look at it, think, have a little play with it, but it's looking really exciting. We've struggled ourselves with pipelines going stale, being on old versions of images and all those kind of things. And this provides this really nice balance between complexity and customization. It lets you, everything by default, override everything whenever you want with no leaky abstraction. There's just this magic string, this string on an image. That's the only kind of new thing. So far it's looking great, and I'll see what you all think when you try and use it.
Yeah, this is one of the really good things about this is, as you mentioned, James, the Jenkins project has been doing checking the Jenkins file into your Git repository, which a lot of people do, but a lot of people want to have that pipeline lives and sits alongside the source code. But they also have the shared pipeline concept where a lot of other people want to have that centrally managed place. You can have extra more governance around that, or if something changed, if you need to roll an update of something, how you to avoid, if you've got 1,000 microservices, for example, it can avoid having to then do an update on each one of those different repositories. But what's really nice is standardizing on Tekton. Tekton task all the way down, Tekton syntax, and it is really nice. So
we do have.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say we do have a command that we're going to try out on all of our production pipelines very soon, called JX pipeline convert. That if you've been using the kept approach, it converts your kept pipelines into this new user syntax. So you can try it out on any of your repositories, see what you think. If you don't like it, just hit, right? So it deletes the kept file, modifies your pipeline to basically regenerate what it would have looked like if you started with a user syntax, which basically means your pipeline just shrinks to almost nothing. But it keeps track of anything that's changed locally since you did your kept. So if you've done a kept approach and then modified your pipeline locally, it will basically refactor out all the common stuff and just leave you your customizations, which we've done this ourselves on lots of our pipelines. We've started off shared pipeline, and then we've tweaked it locally, and we've lost track of what are the local tweaks. So the really nice thing is it's really obvious what you've done locally. Whereas it's sometimes a bit hard with Ket to know exactly what the delta is and what you actually changed and when did you change it and why did you change it. So basically, we're adding a new capability that you can move to if you wish. We'll see how we all feel it, but so far it's looking awesome. Until we've really tried this in production for a while, we won't know for sure if it is awesome, but so far it's looking awesome and I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. There are, I guess, any questions on that?
There isn't any more prepend annotation.
What was the annotation you said?
The prepend annotation, lighthouse.
Ah, yeah. So the prepend and the append annotations. So the JX pipeline converts, detects those annotations and converts it into the user syntax.
Okay.
So in many ways, those two annotations, for those of you who have not seen it, we added a couple of annotations to Lighthouse so that you could easily reuse a step. Let me find an example for you. All of our current pipelines use this for Git cloning, is a good example. We want to do a Git clone at the start of a pipeline. I'll find 1 second. 3 pipeline catalog. Basically, all of our pipelines right now use this prepend annotation, which basically is an early version of this uses kind of idea. We wanted to reuse a pipeline. Let me post it in the chat. There's an example in the chat. There you go. Oh, hang on, I've lost the chat again. There we go. Hang on. Third time lucky. Okay, there you go. In the chat, I've posted the URL. So there's an example of an annotation in the pipeline run, which references a Git shard, a file in a version file in a Git repository. Now the JX pipeline converts your pipeline that uses those annotations to the uses syntax. Currently they're identical. This special annotation versus the uses syntax, they're basically conceptually the same. They both say, click in this Git repository with this version or shard and find this YAML file in that Git repository. The downside of these annotations is, well, there's quite a few, but the first one is prepend only handles adding to the very first step in a pipeline, or there's append, which adds right at the end. So you can't share anything in the middle, basically. You can add at the beginning, you can add at the end, and that's your lot. The other nice thing about the user syntax, apart from it's more concise, is you can then override things. You can say, I'm going to reuse this Git step for Git cloning, but I'm going to change the image, or I'm going to add a new annotation, or I'm going to add an environment variable or something like that. So the prepend literally just appends the step, or prepend or appends the step. The user syntax is equivalent, but it also means you can reuse a step anywhere in your steps. So you can add a step before, which is nice. So the quick answer is we seamlessly translate the existing prepend stuff to the new user syntax when you convert your pipeline. Lighthouse still supports this annotation. Still keep your pipelines exactly as they are. But if you use JX pipeline convert, it will convert these annotation syntax. And then everything is consistent. So everything is then using the uses syntax, and it's much simpler. And if it wasn't clear before, you could have many uses expressions in a YAML file, and they can all be different Git repositories and different files. So you can use steps from any repository in any Git server, to your heart's content, and it's transitive and recursive and all those things.
That was one of the
Any other questions on uses? Those
were some of the struggles, I think, with the Groovy shared pipeline libraries that we used to use with Jenkins. It's almost, how do you have a combination? So I want this one and this one, all versioned as well. So being able to construct these using YAML, and it's a lot more declarative, is much cleaner.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess everybody's looking forward to that demo, James. I can say that now because we've I've just done 9 demos, so it's 9-0 at the moment. But this is also for anybody else doing anything around with Jenkins X. If you've got any demos or any blog ideas yourselves, then it'd be really great to kind of share and even just if it's just thoughts or something you might have done that day. Really want to try and, again, just building up the experiences and sharing, because I know lots of people are looking out for this. So yeah, anything you have, then please share. On Twitter as well, any social media as well. It's all helping with raising awareness and the focus around Jenkins X3, which has a good segue into where we are with Jenkins X3. As we know, we did the beta towards the end of last year, which is going great. I think everybody here is receiving lots of good feedback, and thanks again to everybody that's been involved. We're looking at doing the first LTS release this month. So that will happen. We'll do some testing, making sure that there's a nice, the upgrades are all working nicely. We'll get some release notes and some high level areas. There hasn't much been gone into this LTS release. It's mainly just small improvements, UX improvements, or just bug fixes here and there, maybe a few chart upgrades. So there's not anything that's really jumping out as new features wise. But I think for the next LTS release in February, there is an effort we're hoping to look at around KApp, which is going to be how we do the installation, how the boot job, when we do the internal cluster, in-boot cluster job, in-cluster boot job, when that does the kubectl apply, there's a tool called KApp, which Chris and a few folks, and Cameron, I think I've just seen you join there, we've been looking at. So hopefully we can get that into the next LTS release, which will be end of February. Yeah, James has just added in the link to KApp, so have a little look at that. All right, so just does anybody have any questions on any of that at all? Or to James's work that he's been doing? Alrighty. Okay.
Actually,
sorry, go on, of course.
Sorry, I've just thought of something.
Go for it.
So we've been having an issue recently with our latest Jenkins X3, and we've got an infrastructure Helm file, and that's using some Elasticsearch stuff. And when it's doing the kubectl apply, they have some stateful pods where they'll do things like they'll apply a test pod to take one of the Elasticsearch pods offline and then take the next one offline. And when then you have multiple promotes running at once, it means that you'll get conflicts in your Git pull request within your dev cluster. Obviously, I know that that's not really your fault, but then I don't know if there's any way that it can be resolved on this side, because there's a few little test pods and Elasticsearch and stuff like that where they're generating names with a random string, and then they're applying them, and it's creating them in config root, and it's creating loads of merge conflicts, and then you have to go in and manually close one and regenerate the other, and yeah, it's a bit of a pain.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a similar problem with Jenkins, actually. Jenkins does a similar thing. It generates dynamic test pods. A quick fix could be, we could just configure those charts to not use a random name and use like a canonical name, so it's always the same kind of pod being created or whatever. There is a related issue that we used to in V2. When we created a promotion pull request, the way that we did pull requests was that we used to, if ever a pull request to promote something became unmergeable because it had a conflict, like a merge conflict, it could recreate it on the fly. We used to be able to do that. Since we moved to the V3, we currently can't, but we should be able to bring that capability back. So in other words, any pull request should be able to be, any pull request that's automated, so like a promotion or something, if ever that pull request is unmergeable for any reason, right? Anything changes in Git that means it doesn't merge automatically, we should be able to just recreate that promotion pull request. It's just a case of just doing the work, really. We've just missed that piece out when we did the V2 to V3 migration. Essentially, all we did before was we would effectively comment on a pull request, the logical command to recreate the pull request, if you see what I mean. So we'd effectively say this pull request changes this version of this chart, and then we just read that command from the pull request. So we could basically start from a clean Git branch and recreate the pull request again. It's a thing that we've meant to bring back and we just haven't. I mean, it's a general problem with pull requests that we want to be able to rebase them or recreate them if ever they go stale. We just haven't brought that back, but that's my to-do list to fix real soon. So the general fix of recreating a promotion, we should be able to redo those. But we should also try and minimize the need to do that as well, so that, because every time we do recreate a pull request, we have to retrigger all the pipelines again. So if we can reduce the possible conflicts, for example, by configuring the Elasticsearch chart to not use random pod names and things like that, that would help. But it's the real fix is we should be able to recreate the pull request. We can do it manually right now, but that kind of sucks. But yeah, we should automatically recreate them. One thing that we haven't got yet in Lighthouse that I would really love, I don't know if you saw Vincent on Slack a couple of days ago, was it like 2 days ago? He's been doing some work on using the Github Deployment Api, which is awesome. So that as we do deployments, we trigger in GitHub that we've done deployments. And so rather than, for example, when we create a preview environment, we comment on the issue that, so we comment on the pull request that there's a preview. Vince has been using the deployment API in GitHub, which is much nicer. So whenever we deploy, we say, hey, we've deployed this application in this environment and so forth. What we should be able to do then is have Lighthouse trigger pipelines based on deployments. I'd also like to be able to trigger Lighthouse based on merge conflicts or rebase conflicts. So that if ever a pull request is suddenly not mergeable, we should be able to run a pipeline to recreate it, basically. So if ever you have multiple pull requests on the same repo and one of them merges so that the others can no longer merge, we should be able to recreate pull requests automatically, which would be really nice.
Sorry, go on.
I saw on the M chart with GH5, there was a deployment in the GitHub. I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, this is on the Slack channel. Is this?
No, just noticed this today.
Oh, on GitHub. Yes, I've noticed that as well.
With setting the chart repository to the hash page and the chart kind to page, and I saw on GitHub interface a deployment to the hash page, and I never saw this, so it was a surprise.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. I didn't look at it. I just thought I saw something new on the GitHub API on the GitHub dash pull request. I think it was. Yeah.
Let me pass this in Slack. You will see.
Awesome. I've got to apologize as well. I think that something's changed on this account, so I'll have to change the URL for next time onto a different account. But we've got 8 minutes left on this for this meeting. Sorry about that. But one of the things that just on that GitHub thing, it was actually a really good discussion, because one of the things we've been talking about is trying to do more, present more back to Git providers to say what's happening within the cluster, whether that's a deployment, successful deployments and links and various things. If that goes back to GitHub, then we can actually use our tooling to go directly to GitHub and query these things and maybe visualize deployments and environments and various other things. One of the advantages of that is around security. So in the times where your developers don't have access to a cluster, for example, at least now you could just go directly to the Git provider and actually then be able to query the deployments and everything. So hopefully our tooling can then evolve and provide insight into clusters without actually having cluster access, which is a nice security model, which we know a lot of people have those kind of requirements. Just very quickly, okay, just a quick, won't take long actually, it's more just a quick promotion really. If anybody hasn't looked at, seen, there's some of the blog that we released today. please go and have a look. If you love any feedback you have on it, it is around the promoting the V3 work, basically, that everyone's been looking at and helping with. There's quite a few demos in there. You don't have to watch everything, but they kind of flow together. Hopefully it's given a bit of information to people, but of some of the architecture. We go through real setups of using V3. We actually enable TLS and DNS and walk through those exact steps. Talk a little bit about the new health stuff, because that is really kind of one of the real areas that we're benefiting from with V3, being able to have these custom health checks that are constantly running, ensuring the installation and everything is working as expected. These are all customizable as well, so please have a look at that. We did a Chuck Norris example as well. So if anybody using traditional Jenkins that might be familiar with the Chuck Norris plugin that adds in funny jokes, it's really just to kind of show that there's a cloud native approach using Tekton pipelines, but being able to comment using the Chuck Norris API on pull requests. Of course, it's just a bit of fun, but it can be applied to real world scenarios, running integration tests and various other things, as you might well know. We talk a bit about external secrets and editing and adding in a new secret for your own application, how that might be done. We do upgrades and also a cluster recovery as well. So we actually, in the demo on the recording, delete a cluster via the GCP console, and we do some of the manual steps, but they're fairly limited to be able to completely recover that cluster as well. So this is just the start. There's going to be more that's going to be added on, and obviously with the help of more people contributing to these guides, there's a playlist on YouTube where we'd love to have everybody's contributing some of these guides as well. Even if there's just 2 or 3 minute snippets of something you find interesting, it'd be really great to start collecting these as well. Are there any questions on any of that? Sorry again to rush people. It's only 4.5 minutes left. Any questions on that?
No, it was good. Just need some time to look at them.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. And I appreciate any feedback there are on that. All right. So last few minutes, do you want to open it up? Is there anything that's on anybody's mind? Any questions? Anything that people might want to share?
Any idea how to get rid of POW DevOps 2020?
Yeah, I'll let James answer that one.
Yeah, I think it's a bug in the GitOps Git setup where it's.
Yeah. I've made some tests, but I've set the GitHub name and the GitHub credential to my bot to avoid this. So when it's in a regeneration, it's not Jenkins@gmail for the email used. Maybe I have to retrieve this, but
yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I think it's basically not setting the username to the bot name in the git config user.name or whatever, that command line. I think there's a bug that we don't always set the correct pipeline bot user when we're doing pull requests and commits and so forth. And then GitHub then looks at the email address and finds a random GitHub account that has that email address, which is not Jenkins X bot or Jenkins X large bot.
Nothing, but
so yeah,
for LTS version, it will be good to not have this. I think you will derange people. You will make them surprised.
Yeah. Is that a challenge then? You're saying, Hervé, a challenge to get this one fixed?
It's a long issue, but
yeah,
I take a look at this.
Should do a bounty. The first person gets beers to get to fix this one. But yeah, no, that sounds good. Let's make an effort to try and follow up on Slack around this one and see if we can get that fixed before the LTS version goes through this month. Brilliant. And then, again, sorry for the short meeting. We've only got 2 minutes. We'll update the URL next time. keep a look up for that. And we've had a couple of extra people just join now. Apologies, it's going to be an early finish, but we've got less than a minute. Anybody else have any questions?
Just about the secrets issues and the other bit that I raised before, just with the import and export parsing breaking, just seemed a little bit weird. I'm guessing it's due to the YAML parsing or something. It's where when you export your secrets from your cluster, you export your external secrets. If you have any secrets that are a file that's called secret.txt or certificate.p12, it'll break the YAML parsing. And then when you try to re-import it, it can't find the external secret because the YAML parsing's all messed up. I just wondered if anyone had any ideas on why that could be the case or what's going on with that.
Sounds like a bug. We should be able to replicate. If you can simulate the data that causes the breakage and just submit it on it, we should be able to write a unit test pretty quickly.
You can post the issue again on Slack, so it's at the top of the list, if you don't mind, Tom, and then we'll get onto that.
I mean, to be honest, the main motivation originally for making the import export was when we used to use Vault. Increasingly, when we're using things like Google Secret Manager, we don't ever need to import and export because it is in a cloud native store, so we never move it. So it's really the Vault use case where the Vault is cluster. And
there's other Vault commands
to recreate Vault.
There's other Vault commands that are better using to do import and export as well. Maybe there's an argument. Maybe we should use
so
that.
It could be that we're using secrets wrong by writing these import exporters when.
Well, we had a play with the Azure